Are you tired of trying to play boring meta decks over and over again? Have you spent hours trying to make your own deck just to find out it sucks? And are you ready to escape mid-ladder so you don't have to play Mega Knight E-Barb's Rage Cycle over and over again? Well, you're in the right place. Let me explain. One of the most common questions that I get on this channel is,
Billy, can you raid my deck? Billy, can you fix my deck? Billy, is my deck good?
and in all reality, most of the decks that you guys send me are terrible. So instead of going through all these decks one by one, I decided to make an ultimate guide on how to make a deck that is actually good. Just for some context, I played my own Graveyard Freeze deck for about 6 years. With that deck, I got up to the top 3,000, I had multiple top 10k finishes, and I won a good amount of grand challenges. I'm by no means the best player in the world, but I definitely have a lot of experience in making my own decks and having success with them. Over the past couple weeks, I've spent a ton of time analyzing my deck and other homemade decks and why they were so successful. During that time, I've been able to come up with a formula of what makes these decks so successful over other crappy homemade decks that most of you guys have made. In today's video, I'm going to explain how to make a deck catered towards your playstyle, but also be good enough to get you very far in the game. So without further ado, let's get into it. Just like the damn video already. Unless you're an Expo user, then get the fuck off my channel. So a lot of people think that when you start making a deck, the first step is to pick an archetype. However, this is not how you should start. The first step in building a homemade deck that is actually good is to figure out your playstyle. Your playstyle is how you naturally play the game, and it'll influence how you use any given deck. This part is really important because your playstyle will set your ceiling for different deck archetypes. For example, if you're an aggressive player, you're straight up not going to be able to play Minor Control well. You're going to play way too aggressive when you aren't supposed to, and you're going to perform much worse than if you picked an aggressive archetype. On the flip side, if you're a defensive player and you pick Bridge Spam, you're going to miss opportunities to go aggressive because it doesn't fit your... On the flip side, if you're a defensive player and you pick Bridge Spam, you're going to miss big opportunities to go aggressive because it doesn't fit your playstyle well. When it comes to figuring out your playstyle, there are 3 major categories to choose from. The first category is aggressive, and that includes decks like Bridge Spam, Cycle decks, and Bait decks. This playstyle is for players who love to constantly spam and be as annoying as possible. The goal of these decks is to control the pace of the game, and if you don't, well, you're f***ed. The second playstyle is passive. This style is boring as hell, and it is so damn annoying to play against. Passive playstyle includes very defensive archetypes such as Control and Siege, and is best for players that have a little bit more patience. If you can't control yourself from spamming Elite Barbarians at the bridge, then this playstyle is probably not for you. And finally, the last playstyle is brain dead decks. The beauty of brain dead decks is that they have a very high skill floor, meaning you don't have to put nearly as much time into practicing them to get good results. Brain dead decks include beatdown and split lane decks, and people love to hate on them because they have a high skill floor. The thing is, who gives a shit about what they think? Brain dead decks are great for anyone that doesn't want to spend thousands of hours sweating at the game just to learn every single small interaction. Just whatever you do, make sure to spam the Laughing Goblin or Yawning Princess at the end of every game, just to assert your dominance with your brain dead deck. Once you figure out your playstyle, the next step is to pick an archetype. We mentioned all the archetypes in the last section, but I'll throw up a graphic here on the screen now with every archetype for each playstyle. You don't have to pick your win condition just yet, but you just have to figure out what type of deck you want to play within your playstyle. For example, within the passive playstyle, Control and Siege are going to play very different. Quick note here, if you have a specific win condition that you want to play, you can just pick an archetype within your playstyle that has that win condition in it. Okay, so now that we figured out your playstyle and archetype, the next step is to pick your win condition. For those of you that don't already know, a win condition is a card that your deck is based around. It's usually a card that can get direct tower damage, but in some cases, like Bridge Spam or Three Musketeers, that's not always the case. Not picking a win condition is probably one of the biggest mistakes I see when y'all send me your homemade decks. You guys just throw Mega Knight, Witch, Wizard, and Valkyrie in a deck with some building and 3 random spells and expect to somehow get to the tower. It just doesn't make much sense. And I hate to break it to you, but if you think that's gonna succeed long term, you're just stupid. You need a win condition to get consistent damage. Otherwise, you're just counting on your opponent to make a big mistake, which won't always happen. Right now, the best win conditions are probably Miner, Hog, and Graveyard. But all win conditions can be good if they are played correctly. I'll throw up another graphic with every win condition with each archetype, so just take some time and pick one from there. So now we're gonna pick some support cards. The first thing that you do is automatically pick the Wizard. Nah, I'm just with y'all. But in all seriousness, you will need to pick at least one splash damage card. Splash damage is important because of how prevalent swarm cards are in Clash Royale. If you don't have a splash card, you're just asking to get absolutely destroyed by an idiot spamming swarms. Just keep in mind, certain splash cards are better with specific decks. For example, Skeleton King and Valkyrie are going to do much better with Graveyard than a Firecracker. Just make sure that you take some time and think about the synergy between your splash card and your win condition. Next up is 2 air targeting cards. Sometimes one of these cards can overlap with your splash card. Just as an example, Witch or Executioner would fit in both of these categories. If you choose to overlap a card with your splash card, you'll free up another spot for a different type of card. The reason why you need to have some air defense is because you're going to get absolutely f***ed up by Lava Hound and Balloon if you don't. It's not going to be fun. After that, you're gonna have to pick your spells. You usually want to have 2 spells, but one has to be a small spell. Your big spells include spells like Lightning, Rocket, and Fireball. And your small spells include cards like Wog, Zap, and Snowball. This is another spot to make sure that you're careful about the synergy of your spells in your deck. For example, Rocket might be good in Expo, but it's going to be absolutely terrible in Graveyard. Just make sure your picks make sense. You can figure this all out with basic logic. If you're really struggling to figure out which small spell to use the Log. It is good in almost every deck except for Graveyard. Also note that your other spell could be another small spell, or even something wild like Freeze, Clone, or Mirror. And finally, the last step in creating the perfect homemade deck is to fill out the remainder of the deck with wild cards. These slots should be used to fill any holes that your other cards leave. If you don't have enough offense, add another win condition. If you don't have enough defense, add a building. Something else that you should consider adding is some point damage, like in the Inferno Dragon or the Mini P.E.K.K.A. to help kill tanks. If you choose a cycle deck, now is the time to add your cycle cards, which can be stuff like skeletons, goblins, or any of the spirits. Picking these wild cards isn't always easy. Don't be afraid to try different ones out and find the best combination through trial and error. So there you guys have it. That is the exact formula that I use to build my homemade deck that I've had so much success with over the years. My biggest piece of advice is to be patient and use trial and error to figure out which cards fit best in your specific deck. And once you figure out which ones do, just stick with it and don't ever change it and call it your own.